Hello, I'm Mark Uncapher, sitting in for Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, plans for legislative redistricting are moving forward. The governor's race to replace Larry Hogan heats up. Would rent control make county housing more affordable? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. From the County Redistricting Commission, we are joined by political mensch Sam Statland and Phil Bell, conservative activist and former state Republican staff member. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21. Welcome back to 21 This Week. Every 10 years after the census, legislative district boundaries get redrawn. Often it has been a process in which legislators band together to choose their own voters by drawing artful and sometimes very oddly shaped maps. This year in Maryland and Montgomery County, a less partisan process is being tried. Sam, you're part of that Montgomery County process. Will it be fair?
It's going to be extremely fair. This is the first time in the history of redistricting in Montgomery County where no political party has a majority. We have 4 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 4 independents, a Libertarian, and a member of the Green Party. And we all have the common goal of drawing fair and equitable council districts so that anybody living in those districts gets fair representation and people who want to run for office have an equal and fair chance. I think it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful process.
Well, thank you. Sam, what does a fair district look like to you?
Mark, the main driver of redistricting in Montgomery County is a numbers game, really. If you take a look at our current map, we have 5 legislative districts that have to be expanded to 7. Each one of those 5 districts right now contains approximately 200,000 citizens. And we have to go to 7 districts of approximately 150,000 people each. So the population is really going to have more to do with the shaping of the district than anything else. And then on top of that, of course, you want ethnicity taken into consideration, economics taken into consideration, just a whole bunch of other factors that will eventually determine some of the boundaries of the district. But population is the main driver. And I can tell you right now, Mark, and for those of us that are listening, we're going to have some upset people because, as an example, the folks out towards the Burtonsville area, they feel underrepresented on a lot of issues. Monies to the schools, transportation, housing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's 90,000 people living in that district. So we need to go throughout the rest of the county, move things around in order to get 60,000 more people to form a council district there. And that's true throughout the whole county. If Gaithersburg and Rockville are in their district, that really impacts on the configuration of the other districts. If they're together, it shifts the population to the left and up towards Burtonsville. If we separate them, it shifts the population to the right, down 29 and up towards Poolsville. So it's a very interesting and intriguing way to design. Some of it's numbers and a lot of it is, it's the craft and skill of the artists who are drawing these districts.
Well, it sounds like a balloon where you move in the air in one direction, and if you push too far one way, it goes in the other direction. Bill, what about the state map making process? Does a less partisan approach have a chance?
Well, first of all, I don't believe it's a less partisan approach because, as Sam's described, you have 4 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and then some from other parties. So ultimately what you have is a partisan process. The only difference is we're not saying, well, okay, there's going to be no Republicans included because it's not part of, because the county council is not doing it itself. But what the real discussion here is the problem with redistricting, not just in Montgomery County, but overall. We're trying to draw districts saying that they have to be equal in size because somehow that impacts the power of the voters. But in reality, the reason why districts were always drawn this way is because initially it was very difficult to get from point A to point B when we had horses and buggies and we came up with the idea. Now, if we were to take, for example, Burtonsville and add that to Rockville or add that to Germantown or wherever in order to create a district of 150,000 people, you're going to have their interests be diluted by those of others who may not have any kind of economic relationship or similar needs of that. So it makes more sense to me to, and this goes beyond Maryland, but to look at the process and try to understand really what should a representative do. So to me, all the districts should be drawn based on political boundaries and also natural barriers, including roads. That way you generally group people who have the same interests together. And once you get beyond that, you draw a new district. And if that means there's somewhat of a difference in the population, that's okay, because ultimately everyone is represented equally based on who they are and where they are.
Well, Phil, we use the term communities of interest, which is very important, just as you said, and that is a very important consideration in our map drawing. And the reason I'm saying that we're nonpartisan is because no party has a majority vote. We have to cross the aisles in order to draw and come up with a really fair map that takes all of the subsections into consideration, which is the economics, the race, schools, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is the fairest process that we've had in a long, long time. And you certainly are not going to see any gerrymandering.
Well, I hope that's the case. I want to disagree with you on one thing. I don't think race should be part of it, because race is just a matter of how much melanin you have and don't have in your skin. And it isn't a problem to say include some blacks and some whites, Hispanics, and you name it in the same district. That's not a reason to have a community of interest. Community of interest are what you do, where you live, those things, not what your skin color is. And that to me is wrong.
But we certainly don't want to divide a community of interest like Tamarack, for example, or other areas in Kensington, or up in Burtonsville, or out towards Poolsville. We want to try to keep communities together to enhance their vote, to enhance their ability to influence the decisions of their representative. And I think that's what our goal is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that in general, but my issue is with the inclusion of race.
Well, we'll have to resolve that some other time. Let's move on to our next topic. Sam, longtime school board member Pat O'Neill died this week. What should we remember about her?
We don't have enough hours in the day to describe what we're going to miss about Pat O'Neill. Pat has been in the system forever and ever, as long as I can remember. I remember, meeting Pat, I believe, back in the 70s when I was involved with the Argyle Middle School. She's always had the students at heart. It's always been her number, one concern. Everything that she could do was to get a better education for the kids. And I think she did that with a warm, welcoming heart. And I'm sure we're all going to miss her.
Bill, Montgomery County Public Schools are now back in session for in-person learning, and they require masks, while those who don't want to be masked, they do have the option of not attending in person, but attending virtually. What do you think of the policies that MCPP have for dealing with COVID?
I think it's absolutely absurd. Think about it. One of the most important aspects of school is being together and being able to socialize. Think about when you put on a mask and you walk somewhere, you're not interacting with people in the same way. That means our young people are not developing, whether they're staying at home because they want to avoid the absurd mask rules, or they're wearing it. This doesn't work. We have the statistics that show that children have very little in the way of illness related to COVID. Looking at the broader statistics, COVID is not much more than a cold. And I know you hate it when I say that, but it's only a very small number of people that have a severe impact. And that's no different than the flu. What we need to do is open things up, take the masks off their faces, and give them the chance to develop. Because if this crucial period is missed now, think about in the future when we're talking about interactions as far as business, as far as growing personally, forming relationships. It won't happen. And we are doing them a severe disservice.
Sam, how do you think MCPS is managing COVID?
I think they're doing a great job. And this is where Phil and I are just on opposite sides of the aisle here. I think that Montgomery County, with the direction of Mark Elrich and our health department, has done a magnificent job in counties of over 1 million people. I think we're number 7 on the list as far as keeping people safe and reduced hospitalizations. I know everybody now really is concerned about the children in the schools because they have not been inoculated. Chances of them picking up a illness is much, much higher than anybody else, especially, with this new variant going out. I say to Phil, let's just hang in here for another few months or so and see if we can knock this virus down so that we can keep our kids safe, which I think the school system's doing a great job of doing.
Well, when we
We've
come
been
back
hanging.
from the short break, we'll answer the question: would rent control make the county housing more affordable? Well, welcome back, Sam. State Controller Peter Francho has staked out a position opposing the Kerwin Commission proposal. He's against for more taxes to pay for it, and he also supports more performance accountability than the commission recommended. Will this hurt or help his campaign for governor?
I happen to think the way Mark does. I do not like unfunded mandates. I just don't like underfunded mandates going all the way back to Kerwin, that at one point in time put the state in debt, I think to the tune of $150 million. In fact, I don't know if we've ever worked our way out of it. I see more on the way. I think it's important to get as big a bang up out of the monies that you're already spent and then go from there. So I think a lot of people in the state feel this way, especially in the more conservative areas of the state. And I think it's going to help help Peter.
Peter, well, he's obviously taken a different position from the other folks in the race, so we'll see how that works out. So, former Lieutenant Governor Michael Steele has been teasing the media with his own possible run. Do you think he will get in, and if so, would he have a chance?
Frankly, I don't think he would have much of a chance if he does get in, and for one very simple reason. The Michael Steele that everybody remembers in the past, who ran for RNC chair, who was Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, who was a younger, ideally conservative of the future, has kind of given, now he hasn't kind of, he's entirely given that up. He's replaced that with being one of MSNBC's pet conservatives who says, hey, look, you know what? Is there a conservative out there who's popular? Well, let me figure out how to hate that guy. So those games that he's played for so long have really destroyed his chances. And what you really also have to go back to is when he was RNC chair, he really squandered an opportunity to build a lot of success. So, hey, look, just got to give you the straight facts there.
Sam, let me ask you, who's the Democratic frontrunner these days?
I think Peter is number 1 on the list right now, followed by Rashid Baker, probably number 2. And I think the others are going to tumble by the wayside.
Now, forgive me, but Tom Perez had picked up in the last couple weeks some fairly substantial labor endorsements. Did that put him in the opposite camp as Peter Francho?
Tom's been around a long time. He certainly has a lot of union support, and I'm sure, would be a fine candidate. But overall, I think Peter and his, performance as comptroller and his travel throughout the entire state gives him much more name recognition. People are happy to have their refunds on time and less complications within the taxation system. I think Peter really has done a lot of hard work over the past years and will have a great shot at governor.
All right. Well, we know where your heart is. Phil, how about the Republican side? We've got independent of Michael Steele, who may or may not get in the race, as we already talked about. We've got a primary as well. Where do you see that shaking out?
Well, right now, I do think that Kelly Schultz would probably win if the election were held today. She is known statewide. I know her personally. I think she's terrific, although I do wish that in the time that she was serving under Governor Hogan, that she had taken more of an opportunity to promote herself. It's just, she has a lot to offer. but really need to get that out. And I also would say, don't sleep on Dan Cox. You know, we have a lot of fellow Trump supporters like me out there. Dan has been very fiery. He was one of the people who opposed lockdowns. He was aggressive about it. So as we get closer to actual primary day, I think you might see a lot, that get a lot tighter.
Okay. Shifting gears and topics, the question now is really whether rent control would make housing in Montgomery County more affordable. I'll start with you, Sam.
Yeah, the only thing that we've got going for us in Montgomery County is that we have a lot of increase within jobs, which produces a need for housing. And when you get to apartment buildings, the landlords are required to put in affordable housing units. But then it becomes a question of what really and truly is affordable. And I, in my heart, would love to see more affordable housing in this county, but I just don't know where we're going to get it unless it's some type of a subsidized program.
Now, let me come back. The job growth has been, to say the very least, rather tepid for the last couple of years. You're saying that it's job creation that's creating the demand for housing or the shortage of housing?
But what I'm saying is if you look at the population like I'm doing at redistricting, and you look at the growth, we grow 10% a year over a 10-year period. That's not too bad. And now you look at policies that are going into effect within Montgomery County. We're becoming a biotech center. We're becoming an educational center. We have groups moving into areas like White Flint. We have the 29 corridor with healthcare, and those types of facilities need jobs. So the county, as well as employers and educators, are coming together to put in educated workforces in. These companies are growing. They need to live. They're going to have they're going to have more than median required incomes, and that will lead to more need for apartments and rental space. And the question is the affordability of it.
I guess, the issue obviously is there are other parts of the country that have grown much faster than Montgomery County that don't have the affordability problem that Montgomery County. So that may be a separate conversation. But what we certainly have seen in the last year is inflation is on the rise. And as a consequence, rents are expected to accelerate. And that's one of the things that's been driving this proposal for more rent control. Bill, does rent control work? Will it make housing more affordable?
Of course not, on both questions, but let's start. Sam mentioned subsidized housing. Let's be realistic about what really counts as subsidized housing. A lot of it. If you've gotten a home based on, or an apartment, condo with an FHA loan program, it's subsidized. Now you might say, well, it's just loan guarantees, but no, it's a subsidy that's being provided. So there's a lot of subsidizing, and the subsidizing is leading to a lot more absurdity, such as, number one, high down payments being required, and a lot of restrictions on what you can do, how you can do it in terms of mortgage. That's helping to price younger people out of being able to purchase homes and condos. That's making the entire thing out of whack. The number one thing we need to do is stop subsidizing. The number two thing we need to do is get as far away from any form of rent control as possible. Think about two things. Number one, it costs just about the same to build a low-end rent-controlled apartment as it does to build a high-end apartment. The main things are going to be different, the stuff like appliances. So maybe you have a really nice stainless steel stove here versus a lower-end stove there. It's not that much of a difference. Number two, you also need to think about what the results have been. In New York City, for example, in some rent-controlled apartments, they have one entrance for everybody, except those of you on rent control, when you have the dumpy entrance on the other side of the building. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to live that way. I'd actually like to make enough money to afford to live there in the first place. The closer we get to the free market, the less and less question there's going to be about the ability of people to afford to live in Montgomery County or anywhere else.
So let me come back to you, Sam. And one of the things you're talking about, a lot of growth from businesses coming into Montgomery County. I'm struck, though, that at least anecdotally, I'm familiar, I don't know the data, but that many Montgomery County residents have used the COVID and the opportunity to do work remotely as an opportunity to relocate somewhere else. So they go to a place that's, frankly, housing is less competitive financially, where they can continue to work and not be in such an expensive area. Is that something we ought to be afraid of for the future?
Well, what I think it does is, and I think it's a really great example, is that if you have, a young couple that's starting their career and they were used to going to their office and they were on their job for a couple of years, and they get married and they're living in an apartment, and they discovered that it's easier for them to work from home remotely and their salaries have gone up. They're out here right now looking for, housing within the county. And housing within the county, as we know, is not inexpensive. I don't know what the median price of a house in the county is, but I would imagine that it's probably somewhere in the $500,000 range. So these guys are driving the housing market. In fact, couples are moving out of DC, where housing costs more, and into Montgomery and Prince George's County. And when you look at, the demographics of our county and where people are moving, our growth in the middle of the county and up the 29 corridor and towards Clarksburg, it's outstanding what's growing there. So people got to live somewhere. And I think that's what happened.
But again, what you just said reinforces my point. The reason why all this is being done is when financial institutions have a nearly risk-free product they can invest in and sell their investors on. Well, why wouldn't they be doing that? Because what is $500,000? That's $500,000. And for a relatively small home on a postage stamp lot, where the only thing you're close to is another place where you can go and spend more money, that's not worth it. That's a scam. And that should be stopped by having more of the free market, not either rent control on one side or subsidies on the other.
Phil, the biggest disagreeer with you in this is going to be the growing population of people over 65 in Montgomery County. And the majority of them are living in, apartments. So you look at the Renters Coalition. Right now, a landlord can increase his rent by 1.5% to 2%. There's talk in the county of raising that limit. It's probably not going to pass. But you have to take into consideration all of us who have worked, all of our lives, who want a fair and decent place to live, who can't be priced out of the county. I certainly don't want to return to poor folks' homes like we had in the 20s.
Yeah, but nothing stops the county from increasing taxes by more than 1.5% or 2%. Nothing stops prices from increasing by more than 1.5% or 2%. Nothing stops people from coming over and saying, hey, the washer is broken and this is broken and that's broken and we got to fix it. So it's got to come from somewhere. And a landlord's pocket isn't endless.
Well, we'll have to make that the closeout for that. And when we return, we'll hear parting shots. Welcome back. And now for parting shots. We'll start with Sam.
Well, folks, as you know, I'm part of this redistricting commission. I think this commission is historic in that we're going from 5 to 7 councilmanic districts. I encourage you to Google Montgomery County Redistricting Commission and go to our webpage. It is just chock full of information, which includes all of our past meetings, which is open and fair. And it also includes a sheet that asks you to submit data. We want your input for a fair, open, and great process this year. Thanks.
And Phil?
Well, as much as I would like to talk about my favorite New York Mets and how they gave the thumbs down to the fans, I really got to talk about somebody who's even worse, and that is General Mark Milley. How it is that someone can just decide, you know what? I don't like what the president is doing, so I'm going to call one of our biggest adversaries and give them our battle plans. That is absurd. That has to stop. He must leave the military now. He should be tried for treason. And quite frankly, the rest of that bunch that also undermine the government should go right along with it.
Well, thank you, Phil, and thank you for tuning in each week to MC Media for Montgomery County's Hardest Hitting Talk Show, 21 this week.